So what's wrong with this sentence? Susie pushed Dan and he fell in the water. If you're already savvy to some of the subtle differences between prepositions, you'll know that the sentence should be Susie pushed Dan and he fell into the water. The thing with prepositions is using the wrong one can completely change the meaning of the sentence or can simply be incorrect. He fell in the water implies that he was already in it when he fell. Into means he was not in it to begin with, but he ended up being in it. So today we're going to start talking about some prepositions that show spatial relationships but are often misused. And I hope that you'll walk away with a firmer grasp on spatial prepositions so that you can write with confidence. If you continue watching and enjoy this video, please give it a like and subscribe to see more content on writing and publishing. Now that you've been introduced to the difference between in and into, see if you can tell which one belongs in this sentence. He always came in or into the room with an air of celebrity, treating everyone as if they were his biggest fans. If you said into, you would be correct. Remember, in means you are already there, but into suggests you are not in something and then you suddenly were. So let's look at some other spatial prepositions. In Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's The Sign of Four, Sherlock Holmes often describes the scene of the crime and what he thinks happened using prepositions. This splinter of wood, which I have every reason to believe to be poisoned, was in the man's scalp where you still see the mark. This card, inscribed as you see it, was on the table, and beside it lay this rather curious stone-headed instrument. So let's look at some of these prepositions more closely. A splinter of wood is meant to indicate what the splinter is composed of. Holmes details the splinter is found in the man's scalp, meaning it pierced it but was not fully inside it. The card with the sign of four written on it is found on the table. He could also say on top of if he wanted to be more precise, but both are correct. Lastly, he notes the stone-headed instrument which lay beside the card. So let's pause at beside to delve a little deeper, as it can sometimes be unclear whether to use beside or besides. Beside means next to, and beside or besides can mean in addition to. But besides never means next to. So in this case, the stone-headed instrument was next to the card. Let's look at uses of besides. If you wanted to use besides here, you would say besides the splinter of wood, we saw this card and a rather curious stone-headed instrument on the table. Besides would mean in addition to the splinter of wood, and simply list the other item. However, the physical position of the objects matter here, as it's crucial for Holmes in solving the mystery of the man's murder. So Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is as precise as possible in describing the spatial relationships between the objects. Here are some other spatial prepositions that are commonly used with some examples. After, Jan is standing after John in line. Across, they sat across from each other. Around, they walked around the park for an hour. Against, he was pressed against the floor, the man's boot pinning him down. Along, Ralph and Lorraine walked along the river holding hands. At, I'll meet you at the baseball field tonight. Away, she wanted to get away from him, but couldn't. Behind, don't look now, but she's standing right behind you. Below or beneath, he lived on the floor below or beneath her, but rarely left his room. Beneath is simply more formal. Between, you chose the chocolate donut which was squished between two jelly-filled ones. Beyond, if you look beyond the tree line, you can see a pond that's great for fishing. By, beside, or next to, which all can mean the same thing. She stood by, next to, or beside her husband, looking at all the strangers surrounding them. Down, she took the book down from its shelf to examine the pages. From, she took the candy bar from Jim and gave it to Paul. In front of, the girl standing in front of him had a long ponytail that just asked to be tugged. Inside, they stayed inside the house because of the rain. Near, they were afraid because the bear was near their campsite. Off, he took off his coat. On, she put the kettle on for tea. Onto, on top of, the cat jumped onto or on top of the bookshelf. Outside, a man coughed and gasped in the hallway outside her room. Out of, she took the letter out of the envelope to examine it. Toward, she walked toward her crush, then changed direction when he looked at her. Through, he went through the doorway, uncertain of what lay on the other side. Under or underneath. There was a skunk under or underneath her porch, and he stunk to high heaven. With. I went to the mall with Kathy and Spike to do a little Christmas shopping. I'll attach these examples that I give in a PDF file below for your reference if you want to look at those. But one thing you should know is that the meaning of a preposition can change in different contexts. So instead of simply trying to memorize every preposition's use, it's best to read quality books that use them, and then you'll develop an intuition for when you should use the different ones. I recommend reading mysteries, such as The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, because they are bound to have many prepositions in them. Now let's try a quick quiz. What preposition makes sense based on the context in these following examples? Jenny was running from the masked man, but he was still right besides, behind, or in front of her. Which one is it? That's right. Jenny was running from the masked man, but he was still right behind her. She turned toward, down, or on top of a dark alley, hoping to find a place to hide. Which one do you think makes sense here? That's right. She turned down a dark alley, hoping to find a place to hide. Then the next one, she found a large trash can and took the lid off, from, or under. Which makes sense? She took the lid off. Okay, because the object of the preposition is a large trash can, which comes earlier in the sentence. I'll talk about objects of the preposition in another video. No luck, it was full. Then she heard a sound from outside, inside, or beyond a dumpster that was away, inside, or near her. What do you think? Good. Then she heard a sound come from inside a dumpster near her. Please feel free to ask me any questions you have about grammar. If I don't know the answer, I'll point you to some resources where you can find those. So I'm author Melissa May Younger. Thanks for watching. Tune in for my next videos on grammar, writing, and publishing tips.